Hello and welcome back to another video in the Complete Web Development series. In this series, we are taking you from beginner to job ready. In this chapter, we are building an API, mainly just kind of a CRUD API, and we are building that in preparation for future chapters where we will build up, or what we call a where we will stand up in another front-end site, and we will just use our API to connect for the back end. This allows for many things. One, it's good demonstration purposes for you to show you how to build an API, but this is also a oops, sorry, let me move my microphone here. I was just thinking, I think I feel better in this video than I did in the last. I got a little bit of sleep, but of course, as soon as I start talking, I realize I haven't moved my microphone and I am still kind of groggy. Okay, but we'll get through this together, I guess. I got some coffee here. So let me try this again. We're building an API, and we are using Node.js to build the API. We could have used PHP since we already had experience with PHP, but I wanted to expose you to a few different languages just so that you have some more diversity in your portfolio or background when you go to see other code, okay, or get a job. All right, so let's go ahead and continue on. And this video is going to be an important one because we are going to connect to our database. Now, like in Academod's course, what he would do at this point is either install locally a MongoDB server, or he would go out online and find one, either a free or paid one. There's a lot of them that I guess are free up to a certain amount of requests and things like that that you can practice with development. But in this case, we already have MySql installed if you've been following along through XAMPP. And so if you don't have that, you can go to apachefriends.org and install XAMPP, and then we will get that up and running. And once we have that up and running, we will have access to MySql. So we will just create a new database in our MySql database, and then we're going to use some different libraries to handle some of our MySql interactions, okay? All right, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to switch over to my screen. And let me just kind of clear this up, make it a little easier to look at. And I'm going to do get branch to see what branch I'm on. Right now I'm on main, and we're going to create a new branch called V6. This is video 6. So we will do get checkout -b. Now what this is going to do is create a new branch off of main, and we will call this V6. And then I'm going to do a get push -- set upstream origin V6. And what that'll do is create the branch on my remote GitHub server so that you guys have access to it as well. All right, so next up, by the way, the link for this is in the video description. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and go over to, let me do a clear here. In the server, make sure you are in the root directory of your project. In my case, it is htdocs/API. Once you're in there, we're going to install a new library that we're going to need in this video, and this is going to be called Sqlize. Now, Sqlize is an ORM kind of built-in Node.js that we can use, okay? So this would be kind of a lighter weight version of Eloquent if you're used to Laravel. It will give us the ability to easily create models and manipulate our database inside of our API. So in order to do this, let's just use the npm install, and then we want to save this as a dependency. Oops. And so we're going to do --save, and then the name of this is Sqlize. Okay, Sqlize. We'll hit enter. And once this installs, we're going to be up and ready to go. Next thing I want to do is go ahead and make sure our server is up and running, our XAMPP server. Up until this point, we didn't need that because we're just using our Node server. But because we're going to be using MySql, we need to make sure our XAMPP server is up and running. So I'll just do sudo opt lamp XAMPP start. In my case, it is already up and running. Now, if you wanted to just pull up MySql, you could do so. You don't need Apache running a pro FTPD. I just like running the one command and just getting it up and running. To test that, let's go ahead and go to a browser and just go to localhost /phpMyAdmin which will pull up an administration panel here for our databases on our local server. Let's add a new database for this project, and I'm just going to call mine API. Hit create. I'm not going to worry about creating any tables because we're going to use Sqlize and models, and what will happen is when the server gets booted, it will look at those models and our schema will be defined in the models, and it'll actually create our tables for us, which is pretty cool because we don't have to write migrations or anything like that. We just update our model and it'll add another column if we need it, and we'll see an example of that as we get going. The one thing I'm going to do also is I'm going to make sure that my Node server is not up and running because I want to show you what happens as we write these models. All right, so once we have we have our model, our Sqlize installed, we have XAMPP up and running. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create a model, but before we do, we're going to need a couple things. One, let me show you guys. If you go to if you go to npm and you search Sqlize, this is the package that we just installed, and so you can see the documentation, and then also you can go to their website here, and their documentation, I'll admit, isn't great looking, but there is some information in here that is helpful. Okay, they have examples and things like that. It's just it looks a little dated and it's a little hard to dig through, but it got me through it, so props to them for creating documentation because that's hard to do, and I don't like doing it, so that's where I usually fall short. All right, also I have the response codes pulled up here, the status codes, excuse me. I have these status codes pulled up so that we have quick access to them so that we can return the correct status codes in our API. And then I have phpMyAdmin all pulled up in my browser. All right, once you have that all up and going here, let's go ahead and start creating our first model. So if you go to the models, let's do our to-do model first, as it's going to be the easiest. Go ahead and go to models, right click on there and create a new file, and we're going to call this to-do-model.js. All right, once we've done that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to require in Sqlize, and then we're also going to need something called data types for building up our schema. So what we're going to do is do const, and then in curly brackets, we can do multiple requires here in one line. So we'll do Sqlize, and we're going to do data types. Make sure you get the uppercase and lowercase, the case correct there. And that is going to come from our oops, man. Sometimes code editors try to help you a little too much and it just messes you up. All right, so then you have require Sqlize. So now we have access to Sqlize and data types from this library that we installed. The next thing that we're going to do is create our connection. Now, in order to create our connection, we have a couple of problems. One, we don't want to put our database connections in our code. Much like in our last chapter or a couple chapters ago, we want to use environment variables. And so environment variables can be done very easily now that we've installed NodeMon on our local environment. But let's go ahead and show you what this is going to look like. So let's do const, and we're going to call this MySql. And this is going to be equal to a new instance of Sqlize. Okay, oops, I always spell that wrong. Sqlize. And this is going to take quite a few parameters here. The first parameter is going to be the database name. Okay, so what we're going to do for the DB name here is we're going to say process.env, which will get the environment variable, .db_name. Okay. The next thing that we're going to need is our user. So again, we're going to use our environment variable. So we'll say process.env.db_user. The next thing that we need here is we need the password. So in this case, it will be process.env.db_password. Okay. Now the next thing we need is an options object here. So our fourth parameter is going to be our options. So I'm just going to put that here, and I'm going to break it down to a new line, make this a little bit easier to look at. So and then we need to tell it the host. Okay, so the host is going to be like this. It'll be host, and then it's going to say process environment variable dot db underscore host. Now we haven't created any of these environment variables, but we'll do that in just a moment. The next thing we need is the dialect. So what, much like PDO, Sqlize can connect to different database engines. So it could use Postgres, I believe, and a few others. But we're going to use MySql here. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to set up a pool, and this pool is pretty cool because what this does is it makes our API a little bit more efficient, because instead of closing database connections every time it opens one and runs a query, it will keep a pool of connections open and ready. So once it connects, it will keep that open when it's done, and future queries that come in will use those open connections. So we can have a minimum and a maximum. So we'll do a minimum of 0 here and a maximum of 5 connections at once. All right, so that is going to be our connection that we're going to do here. But like I said, we don't have access to any of these environment variables. So let's go ahead and set that up. It's going to be super easy. What we're going to do is go to the root directory of our project and add a new file. And this new file is going to be called nodemon.json. Nodemon.json. Now this nodemon.json is going to be loaded through nodemon when we load, so we don't need to do anything special there. But what we can do is we can assign with a JSON object here, so open and close some curly brackets. We can assign something called environment. And then inside environment, we're going to have another object. And then we can put all of our environment variables right here. So one that we want to do that we haven't added yet, let's do port, and let's just set our port right here equal to 5000. Okay, and then we'll do another one, and this one's going to be, oops, oh yeah, this one's going to be DB host, and in this case our DB host is going to be 127.0.0.1 for our local machine here. Then we're going to do DB user, and our DB user for us is just root on our local machine here. And then we're going to do DB password, and if you have a blank XAMPP install, this is just an empty string. And then what we're going to do is put DB name. So this will be the name of the database that it's connecting to, and in our case it is just API, or whatever you named your database that you created in phpMyAdmin. Okay. All right, so this is our environment variables, and what happens is when our server boots, Nodemon will load these as environment variables, and we have access to those via process.environment, and then the name of the key that's in the Nodemon. So that's where it's going to get DB host, DB password, and DB name from. Now, you might want to add this to the get ignore if you're going to have other things in here. And the problem is I've already added the file without this thing get ignore. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add a new file up here at the top. You know what? Let's just do it above these logs, I guess. And I'm just going to call this nodemon.json. So we'll ignore that file. And now you see it becomes gray. All right, so we haven't pushed it or anything, so we're in good shape there. So we've added that to the get ignore, so that if we do end up having sensitive information in this environment file, this will not get pushed to the local server. Now that also means that if you guys clone my project and look at it, it's not going to have this nodemon.json. So what I'm going to do, and you guys keep yours out of Git, but what I'm going to do just so that you guys can get the example is I'm going to leave in my get ignore this. I'm going to leave this just commented out at the top, but you guys go ahead and and put that in because you don't want sensitive information in your repository. Now mine's not going to have anything sensitive because this is all just my local connection information, and so I'm fine with that going up to GitHub for you guys to view. Okay, so now that we've done that, we should be able to connect to our database, but what we want to be able to do is define our schema so that when actually what's cool about Sqlize is that when we boot up our application, we boot up our server, it'll look at this the schema in our models and build out the tables that we need based upon our schema. So right here under MySql, let's go ahead and create a new constant, and we're going to call this to do, uppercase to do, and that's going to be equal to MySql.define. Just like this. And the first thing we're going to define here is our table name, and we'll use an uppercase to do here just to kind of go along with their schema rules for Sqlize. And then we're going to give it an object as a second parameter. Okay. Before we do anything else, before this gets too crazy to look at, below this, go ahead and do to-do.sync. And this line right here is what's actually going to sync the database with this schema we're about to define. The next thing we need to do is we need to make this to-do available as a model in other parts of our applications. In order to do that, we're going to use module.exports, and we'll just set that equal to to-do. All right, so now we're ready to build out our schema in this right here. And so in order to do that, we need to tell it, we don't need to give it an ID because in MySql it's going to add the ID and make that the primary key by default. So we need to tell it the other columns we need. So we're going to use user_ID, and this is going to be an object, and we're going to tell it that the type of this column, and we're going to use the data types that we included here, and this is going to be a data types integer. Like that. So it's data types integer. It's going to tell that this is an integer. And then what we're going to do is we're going to give it an attribute called allow null. And we'll just give that true. So we can add to these to-dos with a null user ID. After user ID, put a comma here, and then we're going to add name. Now name is going to be of a type data types dot string. Okay, and then we're going to add some validation rules. I wish that wouldn't show up. We're going to add some validation rules here. So we'll say validate, and our validate rules, we're going to add some stuff here. So we have length, and our length will have an error message if they go over this length or not within these lengths. But we can use message, and the message here is going to be name must be between 2 and 255 characters. Now this is going to set up, this is model validation, so we need to give it some args here, and that's going to be an array, and the first element in that array is going to be the minimum, and the maximum will be the second element. So now we have user ID and name set up for our schema. Next thing we want to have for our to-do is a Boolean field called completed, and this is just going to get a type equal to data types dot Boolean. Okay, and then we're going to set a default value of false here. So when it's created, it'll have a default value of false. So now we have our user ID, our name, and our completed column. Once we've done that, let's see. We are going to add another parameter here we're going to add another parameter, and this parameter here is going to be our indexes. Okay, so we're going to say indexes. Oops, let's spell that right. And then that is going to be an array of objects. So the first object here is going to be fields, and we're going to create one with an array with fields, and that will be for user ID. All right. The next, let's do another object. I wish this would not show up here. That's so annoying. Let's do fields, and then we're going to do another array, and this will be user ID, and the other field we're going to put in there is completed. So we'll have, this is a multi-field index here that will pair user ID and completed, so that when we're doing searches for like our completed to-dos or our incomplete to-dos, it will use this index hopefully. And then if we're just getting all for a user, we can use this index, okay? That's it. This is actually all we need to do for our to-do model. And this will define the schema. With this line here, it will sync it to our database. So add this table to our database, and then we'll have access to it to use it. So let's go ahead and fire up our server and see if we have any errors at this time. So let's go here, and I'm going to go to a next tab here. And what I'm going to do here is just do npm start. Now, actually, if I go to my API here and we look at structure, I don't have any tables. And that's because we're not really using the model yet. Okay, so let's go ahead. We didn't have any errors. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to shut this down. I don't like having this running while I'm building my models out, because I don't want NodeMon restarting and messing up my database or doing anything weird. It's probably fine, but I'm just paranoid about it. All right. So in order for us to have this used, all we need to do, I think, is go to, we need to go and open our to-dos controller here. So if we open our to-dos controller, let's just go ahead and finish up our create. So at the top here, what we're going to do is we're going to do const to-do is equal to require. And what we're going to require is back a directory. We're going to go to our models, and we're going to require in the to-do model. All right. So now we have access to this. Now if I start my server, I believe, and I could be wrong on this, yeah. So now that we're using this, we actually have a problem here saying that we need another package called MySql 2. So let me close down the server, and let's go back here and let's do npm install -- save MySql 2. And I guess that's a package that's a dependency for Sqlize, but because it uses different databases, it doesn't just install all these. You just have to manually install that. So let's go now and try to npm start again. And now you can see that it's executing create table if not exist to-dos. So let's go, there is an error. No database selected. Let's go back and check here and see if indeed it did not create. It did not create that. So what do we have? We have some sort of problem here. Let me go back and look at our to-do model. Let's see. New Sqlize process.env.db name. You know what? Let's go here and let's change this port to port 3000 and just make sure our environment variables are working. So I'm going to close this connection and run npm start again. It still says listing on port 5000, but that is because go to server.json. Process.env.port. Oh man, I put the NodeMon in the wrong directory somehow. This needs to be in the root directory. of the application. Let's try again. I'm gonna go here, close this down. Yeah, now you can see it's listed on port 3000, so it's loading our environment variables now here. So that's good. Let's go ahead and close this. I'm going to change mine back to port 5000. I just changed it to 3000 just to make sure NodeMon was running this, and it wasn't in my case because even though I said put this in a root, I must have clicked on this directory to create it instead of the root. But this Nodemon.json, in order for it to be used when booting up the server, it needs to be in the root directory. All right, so now we don't have an error. So let's go to our phpMyAdmin now and refresh. And now you can see we do have a table called to-dos. And if we open that, we can see the structure has our ID, our username, name, completed, and then it also created at, and updated at timestamps for us. And we have our indexes down here. So perfect. We have our database created from the schema of our model. And I think that's pretty sweet, actually. Okay, so let's go ahead, and since we're on a roll with that, I think what we'll do is create the other two models we're going to need, and then we'll call it a video. That way our database structure is ready to go for our next video. So what we're going to do here is let's go ahead and do our user model next, which will be, not terrible, but, not great. So in our models, we're going to go new file, and let's create user.model.js. And then what we're going to do is bring in our Sqlize and our data types. Oh, come on. Now this is called destructuring right here. When you do this, it's pretty cool. I don't know if there's an easy syntax to do that in PHP, but that's one cool thing about JavaScript is you can do that. The next thing we're going to use is set up our database. Now this is a little repetitive. We could probably figure something out with this, but for now we're just going to, we can just copy this from our other connection here. There we go. We could make a parent model and then extend those as children, but I'm just going to keep it as simple as possible for now, I think. All right, so then what we're going to do is we need to create our const user, and this will be equal to a MySql.define method. Underneath that, what we're going to do is do a user.sync, which will sync the database, and then we are going to do a few other things, but in this video we'll just leave it at module.exports equal user. So now we can import this in another file. Inside this define, we need to give it our table name. So in this case it's going to be, well, this is our model name actually, but it's going to be user, and it'll make a pluralized name for the actual database. The second parameter is going to be some options here, and then we'll have another parameter for some indexes. So first thing, we'll just go ahead and skip down to this line here, and we're going to have one called fname. Now fname is going to have a type of data types dot string. Okay, and that's it for that one. And then oops, this is dot string. And then we're going to do comma, and we'll do lname, and that's going to be very similar. It's going to have a type equal to data types dot string. Okay, the next thing that we need is an email, and the email is going to have a type of data types dot string. Now what I can do with this is put in parentheses the amount of characters. So the max characters for an email is 155. So we'll just go ahead and put 155 in there. And then what we can do is we're going to say, hey, this has to be unique in our database. So we'll use unique true. We don't want multiple with the same email. And then we're going to use a validate to do model validation. And we have one called isEmail. And isEmail will just take a message. So I'm going to put a message in here of must be a valid email. Okay. So that is our email field. Let's do another field for password. And this is going to be a type of data types dot string. And we're going to make that one 75 characters. All right. And then we'll use validate. And on this, we're just going to validate the length. And this will have a message. And it'll say password must be at least 8 characters. And then we will use the len or the args, and that's an array, and we'll do 8 for a minimum, and we'll use 255 for the max. Now I know that I put 75 here, so our column can't hold 75, but we're going to be using bcrypt to encrypt this. So we could do this or even more and still only take up 75 characters in the database. Okay, so that's that. The next thing we're going to do here is we need to have our indexes set up. So in the last parameter is going to be an object. We're going to say indexes, and indexes is going to be an array of objects. And we're just going to have one, and fields will be an object of email. Okay, so that's good to go. Let's go ahead and restart our server here. And it's only creating to-dos because we're not using our user model anywhere. So just to see if it's working, let's go to our controllers, and might as well just do this in the user's controller. So above the user controller, we're going to do const user is equal to require models user dash model. Oops, gotta spell const right. I can't tell you how often I do that. I don't know why. All right, so let's go back here now, and it says alter table users. So let's see if it added our users table here to our database, and it did. So let's just quickly check the structure of that. ID, fname, lname, email, password, timestamps, and we have an extra index. What is user's email? Maybe Sqlize is adding this one here. Yeah, it's adding it for column. Let me look at that real quick and see if I made a mistake. I don't know. I'm not sure why it created both of those. I'm not going to worry about it for now. Okay, let's do our last model, and our last model is going to be our contacts model. Contacts model is going to be a little bit easier. So I'm going to right click on models, hit new model, and this will be contact-model.js. And we'll just go to the user model and copy our import and our connection information. And go back to the contact, paste that. And then what we're going to do is you do const contact is going to be equal to MySql.define. And we're going to define the contact. And it's going to take an object as the next parameter. It will also take another object for the last parameter. And then what we're going to do is we are going to do contact.sync. And then we will do module.exports, and we're going to add our contact to that exports module. Okay, so now we just need to define all of our fields in our contact model table here. So this is also going to have a user ID, and that will be a type of data types dot integer. All right, and then we'll also do allow null of true on that. The next thing we're going to add is the f name. The f name will have a type of data types dot string. We'll do l name. That will have a type of data types dot string. Okay. We'll have another one here. We'll call it email. That will have a type of data types dot string. And we'll do our 155 on that. Now, I don't care if this is unique on this one because multiple people in our database can have the same email, so I'm fine with that. And then our phone is going to have type data types dot string, and I'll just limit that to 55, and that's it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have indexes. All right. And in here, we're going to set up an index with just our user ID. Okay, so that we can find these by the user ID. I'm going to save that. We'll go to our contacts controller, and at the top here, we're going to go ahead and require that in. So we'll say const contact is equal to require models contact model. We'll save that. And now let's go and check our database. And now you can see we have contacts, to-dos, and users. So let's just double check the structure here. Well, looks good to me. All right, so we have in this video successfully connected to our database, and we know that we have because our code, our model is actually connecting to the database to add these tables. We've done that through our environment variables via the nodemon.json file here, which incidentally just happens to run when you run npm start, and we're running nodemon server.js. When you do that, it looks for this nodemon.json and loads any options, and so we are able to load as an option our environment variables. Then we set up all of our models, and we were able to use environment variables called db name, db user, db password, and db host to connect to our MySql database. We've installed two libraries in order to use this, Sqlize and then MySql 2, so that we can, I guess that's an underlying dependency with Sqlize so that it can connect to MySql. And then we've defined our schemas along with our validation if we needed it for our models. In the next video, I think what we'll do is we will do a few actions in our user model so that we can create users in our database, so then later we can go ahead and knock out our validation, user validation. So for that we're gonna be using JWT tokens, which is a JSON web token object, and we'll talk more about that when we get there. But that is what we're gonna give the front end or the end users when they log in, so that they can send that token along, and we know exactly who it is and that they are sending a valid token. All right, so I think we're gonna wrap it up there for this video. If you're enjoying this, please comment, like, subscribe. I'm gonna shut down my server here. And if you'd like to support me on Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/free skills. So let me check this out here. Git status. Let's add that. I'll commit this. And we'll say DB connection and models. I'll do a push. And then what I'm going to do is go ahead and git checkout main. And I'm going to merge that back into main by using git merge v6. And then I can do a git push. And now main is up to date with that branch. All right, guys. Well, I will see you in the next video. Have a wonderful day.